It is the 15th of November, 2022. Hope everybody's doing good on this Tuesday. Wonderful, wonderful Tuesday. I'm Dana Durnford. I'm also known as the nuclearproctologist.org. And you can call in at 589-4406. We do these shows 5 days a week, whenever early, never late. For the 5 people we got on our show, I'm always on time. All 5 of them will tell you that. Dana is always on time. Over a decade of being on time. Imagine how joy I have when I see 5 people. I'm waiting for my show. That's amazing. Who are these people? Bless their hearts. Let's get it on, I suppose. We got Conference of Parties, 27 years of constipation. 27 years of constipation. We got a poll tonight. In case you didn't notice. Should the scumbag IAEA really have a pavilion? This is the first time they've had a pavilion because they're scumbags, right? At Conference of Parties 27, and nuclear is the world's biggest polluter. Nuclear is climate change. Nuclear is global warming. And the evidence for that is indisputable, uncontestable. We've done the research. It's actually an extinction event from the nuclear industry. It happens in increments, and then it accelerates. And now you've seen all the whales and birds and mammals and animals dead or emaciated or both. Alrighty, just a recap of last year. Air travel industry emissions are outside the scope of the Constipated Party 27, again this year. So is the military, by the way. And shipping. You know, all the globalists. International air travel industry's emissions fall outside the scope of the constipated parties. Too expensive, too slow. Even the baseload argument for nuclear doesn't work. That was last year. Now they got a pavilion down there. That's crazy. Nuclear power poses unacceptable risk and is not a climate change solution. It's the slowest form of energy you can implement. It's the biggest polluter. All the fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation into all the farms and the communities and the ecosystem. Majority of them are surrounded by farms. Which is probably not an accident. It is far too slow and costly to impact the climate crisis. Did you know that this lady won 2 prizes for discovering radium, and she lost both of her hands? Her laboratory in France is still, 90 years later, is still too radioactive to be touching anything. And they actually bring people in there for a quick run through. Oh, that's where she sat, that's where she stood, have a good day. The Simpsons were used to bludgeon your common sense part of your brain. And same as Spider-Man and the Hulk and stuff like that. There is no planet B. And so don't let a handful of the military-industrial complex like United Nations and the subsidies ruin your planet. They don't have any authority. There's 195 militaries. That's all United Nations is, right? Eisenhower called them the military-industrial complex, and George W. Bush Sr. called them the New World Order repeatedly in speeches. So, I'll just get you up to stupid amount of today and yesterday and the weekend news to cover. So nuclear tests have changed the Earth's atmosphere. So when you hear me talking about radiation is global warming, Fukushima was the straw that broke the planet's back. And it was equal to, we're not able to say 100%, but you had around 20 reactor cores. Think of 20 reactors melting down at the same time. It was worse than that. One of the reactors was mixed oxide fuel. This plume model is based on 20 days of radioactive fallout, which is permanent. It lasts for a million years and pulse energy in gammas, alphas, neutrons, and betas almost at the speed of light. And when they hit each other, they don't mingle. They change direction almost at the speed of light and creates another effect known as X-rays. And so all the insects and the birds and animals and that, and humans, of course, are getting full-body X-rays. And so that sterilized the spiders and the ants and all the little important species. We're the predatory species, but we're generally a good species. But when they put a suit on you, apparently you become a predator. Irreversible heart damage for children with 50 becquerels a kilogram of just cesium. Now, cesium is their go-to propaganda mode. It's a very nasty isotope, don't get me wrong, but cesium, and you notice in this picture, if like just about any nuclear power plant, we'll get to that, just about any nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms worldwide. They're always hemorrhaging radiation from the fuel pools that are still splitting the atom. And just a fraction in your children's diet, for instance, was one of the many issues besides cancer is irreversible heart damage and organ lesions that are thyroid glands that are producing radioactive hormones. And if you're eating from these farms, you're bioaccumulating it. So everything you accumulate your body in the insects and birds and animals and mammals will attack it with white blood cells for the remainder of their lives in an attempt to build a tumor around it. Because this is lethal to everything with replicating cells, it shouldn't be part of. So the biggest polluters, besides the military and aircraft, is shipping. One massive container ship equals 50 million cars. There's 90,000 of them on the ocean at any given time, and 15 of them is equal to 760 million cars. So divide that into the fact there's 90,000 of them at any given time. If 90,000 divided by 15 is 6,000. So 6,000 times the population of the 760 million cars is equal to 4 trillion. Now it's actually 8 million people on the planet as of today, right? But it's equal to, say, over 4.5 trillion people's worth of automobiles, the shipping industry, and pollution. But if you look at it in the context, rather, of people, it's 42 trillion people. I made a mistake on what we were talking about earlier. 6,000, 760,000. Oh, yeah, I went by millions in order to get the scaled up of the population at 90,000 ships, because each ship is equal to 50 million cars, but 15 big ones are equal to 760 million cars. Potatoes. Nuclear power has become irrelevant, like it or not. We'll get up to today's news really quick, with just points from last year. Debate is over. Nuclear power has been eclipsed by the sun and the wind. Saw their electricity generating costs decreased by 90% and wind power by 70%. And nuclear costs increased by 1/3. And there was a net nuclear capacity increase of 0.4 gigawatts last year. And renewables added 248 gigawatts, which is the equivalent. It was actually, turns out at the end of the year it was 261 or something. In gigawatts, which is equal to 300 nuclear power plants. We're talking 12 months came online. But because they're sabotaging the renewable storage by just claiming batteries, and you should be doing geothermal, obviously, right? Why would you want anything else? Just get rid of gas, oil, coal, nuclear, drill down, tap into the geothermal, and then get rid of the commodity fuel sources you were using, and you got reliable energy for 1,000,000 years at your fingertip without no trains and trucks and stupid nuclear. It's no wonder despair is reigning in the nuclear company's headquarters. This is why they have a pavilion now at constipated parties. Well, you know, we've been calling it constipated parties for so long. It's hard to... Like, calling it cops is embarrassing. The fact they choose that name shows their contempt for the conversation and for humanity. They're the cops, right? The arrogance of it. Well, I want you to remember how nuclear kills fish at each one of these disease factories. These are disease factories. The fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation. But they kill more than 17 billion fish in New York and 9 billion fish in New Jersey, which was a smaller reactor. And that this is different ways now. And through the cooling systems, they're vacuuming up trillions of newly hatched fish and destroying them in the heat exchangers. Another way to kill fish, and there's strong evidence that the decline in the fish stocks along the entire northeast Atlantic seaboard, you know, New York, Boston, Canada, is due more to the destruction of baby fish than the overfishing of adults by commercial fleets. And who's the biggest genocide machine, omnicide machine, is the nuclear industry. The Indian power plant in the Hudson River, up from New York, sucks in 2.5 billion gallons of water a day and kills about 2 billion juvenile and mature fish in a stream and thermal plumes. And the NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, has estimated more than 300 billion baby fish are killed. They're sucked into the 40-foot wide intake pipes because you need 4,500. The one they're building in Britain right now, Hinkley Point C, is the biggest construction site on the entire planet in history, and they're calling it carbon-free. There's 4 pictures. Everything there has to be triple inspected. Every nut, every nail, every bolt, every screw, every wire, and everything is inspected 3 times. In the background, you might notice it's surrounded by farms. Do you really think that's a coincidence? If you look at one of the numbers, it's actually 36,000 bombs, the size of Hiroshima, equivalent of nuclear testing worldwide. It's much more than 36,000. We've already done the math on it. 30 years of nuclear tests have poisoned the environment and the entire population of the planet. We got studies suggesting that nuclear testing, which is the same as a nuclear war, changed the sex ratio of all males and females of all species, not just humans worldwide. More males than females, less population. The Western governors in the United States of America want nuclear testing compensation expanded to include Utah, Arizona, Nevada, and Colorado, Idaho, Montana, New Mexico, and Guam, and everybody in these places, in these states in America, are entitled to $50,000 to $150,000 up to $150,000 from being poisoned by radioactive fallout from all the nuclear testing, because all of these states are permanently contaminated. Go read it yourself. And it's the whole country, as it doesn't stop at any borders. An interview with the father of global warming. So he wrote a paper in 76, I think it was, or 75 rather, which is Wallace Brockner. So he wrote, and the whole world said, there's 4.3 million papers produced every year in North America, academic studies. He wrote it by himself, and because he was a perfect agenda for the industry to cover up what it was doing. In 1975, if you think about all the nuclear testing going on, and the Geiger counters were screaming worldwide, and that meant they were pulsing energy almost at the speed of light, 186,000 miles per second. And it never goes away. It just keeps pulsing energy. Gas, oil, and coal emissions don't have those attributes. Nuclear fuel pools, there's 1,000 of them worldwide, hemorrhaging into the environment. So Pakistan and Russia and everybody else was setting off non-stop nuclear weapons at each other, at themselves. So they were firing nuclear weapons at their own citizens by radioactive fallout. So that's a nuclear war. For instance, the Soviets' biggest bomb was equal to 3,800 Nagasaki bombs going off at the same time. That's a nuclear war. If Russia and China fires 1,900 Nagasaki-sized 15-kiloton bombs at each other, is that a nuclear war? Is it? I'm only asking you. You can call in 709-589-4406. You can text me the answer. You can put it in the comments section. But do something. Be somebody. Speak out. Don't worry about rejection. I start off my shows with 3, 4, 5 people after a decade. 5 days a week. Like a big sucker. I'm right here. With the nuclear industry, got no one to pick on, only me. Kevin puts out a few videos, but he's not a threat. Threat is information. Threat is documentation. Threat is consistency, day after day, week after week, month after month, showing the industry's perpetual lies. List of nuclear weapons tests. So when you go at Brock, and you look at Brock, remember, he wrote that paper blaming you so the nuclear industry didn't get the blame that it deserved. Incredible betrayal. So when I done the math, that's 545,000 kilotons, which is still a fraction of it, which is 36,000 Nagasaki bombs going off of radiation released into the environment. These are plutonium bombs, right? So the radiation they produce is significant. It ain't going away in the human experience. As of 1993, worldwide, 520 atmospheric nuclear explosions. We got Gar calling in. Hi, Gar. How are you doing, sir? Just give me a second there. I'll get you set up. Hang on. Go ahead. Yeah, we got you. Now, for folks who don't know, he usually calls in with readings from a spectrometer or other devices about rainwater and looking for cesium-137, americium-241. Has been doing it quite a long time. Hello, sir. How are you?
Well, I'm doing good. Unfortunately, some of my relatives aren't. They're gone.
Yeah, that's terrible news. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I saw a few people there talking about their cats. And I remember, when I was at my brother's and sister-in-law's there, I thought I'd test their cat food. So it had that in there,
Yeah.
like I'd expect. But with this instrument, if I have other, they call them test samples, you have to have a sample of the actual emitter, and I could buy more and then like test for other isotopes. I don't know if there's any sense in that or not. You know, the ones I have are pretty much telling the story if I have those two.
Well, you're not,
besides
as long as you're close, right? You don't need to.
Yeah.
Right, you know, you're not doing a paper where anybody's going to scrutinize and say he's off by 10 becquerels or this way or that way.
Yeah, those are direct on the instrument there. But anyways, I ran a few today. You know, some rain and food.
Yay! And how did that go?
Well, I found the stuff I'm eating. I found it's pretty tough to escape from it. The only thing I could think of, you know, I typed it up last time. You'd probably have to get a 100-year-old greenhouse.
Yeah.
And then test well water from it, because if it's rained on,
it's
then
done.
it's going to have it in there.
Yeah. Oh no! Well, for folks that are not aware, here in Canada, we got studies at 220 million atoms of 129 per liter of rainfall sustained, and which means there's incredible numbers of the other stuff, right?
Yeah. Now
it's not going away.
Done a full spectrum.
Yeah.
I have done a full spectrum, including the unknowns. I did that on an air filter out of my own furnace, and it was in the thousands. I mean, big time. You know what? You have to be able to highlight the portions so the computer program will add up those sections.
Right. Yeah.
Where they come up.
The peaks, right? Yeah.
You know, or each little slice, my instrument literally slices up atoms, and yeah, I can add up, you know, each individual tiny section. If you look on those pictures I showed you,
right,
each one of those little slices is a section, and then the colored parts are highlighted with the red lines through it.
right.
Is where it isolates the specific isotope measured in kilo electron voltage. So I have done that. I have taken the time to do that. But it's only gammas. You know, that's not including the alphas and betas.
Yeah.
And then I can slide the the screen across, and then there's other stuff that shows up in other places.
Yeah, and there's no need to do all that kind of work anyway, right? If you get one or two major numbers, you can extrapolate pretty well everything anyway.
Yeah.
For all intents and purposes.
Yeah.
But again, go ahead, yeah.
My intention was, you know, years ago to see if, okay, is this for real or not? And, you know, I got like 5 grandkids now. You know, I had 4 back then, and I thought, what did they do? I got to know, did they do this, or is this a problem, or isn't it?
Yeah, I've been thought that way, yeah. And when like yourself, right? You had to quantify the folly.
You know, if you would have threw me off of a bridge years ago because, you know, I was studying to work on these things, then I wouldn't be around talking to you now.
No, that was just that was me attacking the industry. When I say stuff like that, you should throw them off a bridge. I like saying you should throw them off a skyscraper in a wood chipper, but
oh yeah, wood chipper feet first, of course.
Alive, yeah, preferably. I'm pretty angry at the industry, obviously, right?
Yeah. Anyway,
nothing personal. Today the rain, you know, I got 1,066.6 cesium or counts per minute per liter of americium 241, another 2016.6.
of cesium-137, 3,083 between the two.
Every time I hear 241 americium, it's like you got nails on a chalkboard where your body goes ooh, because that changes to plutonium 241.
Yeah, that's what they're putting in our smoke detectors, and they all go in the garbage can.
Yeah, on top of
eventually.
that, yeah. Oh yeah, and the incinerators, yeah. All the local incinerators. That was a dirty trick, wasn't it? Because if you make 1 billion smoke detectors with just a little speck of americium 241, it adds up, right? You're in the many tons of americium 241 all of a sudden.
It is a lot.
Yeah.
The older ones are worse. For some reason, when I got a newer one, it didn't set the survey meter off as much or the spectrometer. So that probably don't mean much. It's like these green people. They are going to be green. They're going to be glowing in the dark green.
That's going to be bad in the near future. It's bad now.
Yeah. I did it twice today, and they were pretty close. 1,216 of
241
americium, and another 1,933 of cesium-137. And then I did my favorite crackers, organic. 49.9 of americium and
holy fuck. Some serious bioaccumulation going on there.
Yeah, and we're eating this shit every day.
Oh, the industry, they've went through a lot of trouble to cover up. They generally, it's pretty hard to catch them talking about anything but cesium-137 or iodine-131. 90% of the times that's what they're going to mention. And particularly the apologists, you'll see them do that too, right? And it's just,
even if those were the only ones,
still terrible. It's horrific, yeah. Well, your numbers is horrific numbers. Because Fukushima was making, after 1,000 days, started producing a 100-to-1 ratio of strontium-90. And that should go on for about 10,000, tens of thousands of days before that starts slowing down. So after less than 3 years, this thing was a genocide, omnicide machine in overdrive. And when you see, because you got to multiply. I know there was this famous person in nuclear industry was saying you got to multiply the number by around 600 to get the real numbers.
Actually, you do.
Yeah.
You do.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
My numbers are actually, I'm thinking they're low. I try to get a negative test. So what I do is I do a background check before and after, because if it fluctuates a little bit with something, that's lower.
Well, you want to calibrate it the best you can, right? So you feel good about it when you do the extra work.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's anything above background, before and after. So I'll do a background test inside 2 lead castings, and then I'll put a sample in, and then run a background check again, because if there's a fluctuation of what's in my house, and sometimes that'll make a difference. So I try to go with the higher level of background to negate. Now, when you get these high rain levels, there just isn't nothing going to negate it.
No, that's going into your that's getting filtered at your water reclamation facilities worldwide. And I cover a story pretty regularly of just this single spot close to Tokyo. And they had 50,000 bags, 1-ton bags of sediment from the water filtration for the city. And it was too radioactive to get rid of. They wanted TEPCO to pay to get rid of it. And TEPCO said, no, tough luck. But 50,000, they were producing around 5,000 tons a year. I don't quote me exactly, but 50,000 tons for a single city of sediment. And your water pipes were contaminated, your washing machines, your sinks, your hot water tanks, and you were getting showers and washing, drinking, eating, and consuming in all those homes. They need to be dug up and taken to a repository, see, and start over again far, far away.
Well, in Chernobyl, when they went to bury that, they brought in like bulldozers, and then they had to bring in other bulldozers to bury the bulldozers.
That's right. Some of them helicopters only got used once. All 600 pilots died. No, that's a great point about the bulldozers. I don't mention it enough. And all the farmers, too. They plowed in all the fields and they covered it over. They threw all the animals. They shot wild herds of animals. And farmers had to burn or... Like when you burn the radioactive contaminated food or whatever, that's just going to release the radiation back into the environment. That's the definition of a dirty bomb, right?
This is the worst one. We've lost the nuclear war as a planet.
Yeah.
They don't need a nuclear war. I mean, it's just a time release thing.
They've done
with
it.
With the crabs, how many crabs was that? How many billion crabs or whatever just like vanished?
Yeah, because they're very prolific in reproducing too, the crabs. And so they were a huge part of the ecosystem, an important part of the ecosystem, obviously, right? Because they're on the floor, so they're eating anything that's big enough to get their hands on that dies and falls down, right? They recycle it right away into nutrients. And so when you take them out of the picture, it's crazy because they're so prolific. Alaska snow crab industry is done. They've never seen it coming. And so is the other crab industries up there. They shut it all down, and it's too late to...
How about the king crabs? I haven't heard anything about those.
Right, the king crabs. Right, you are. Thank you. Now, we reported on that the last time we covered the marine life and bird die-offs. And, they must have known. The industry must have known. Yeah. They left it till the last second. Okay, my friend, was there anything else? I got a big show to get through. Was there anything else you want to throw out there?
Okay, all right. Sorry about taking up your time.
It's okay. No, it's fine, man. No, it's fine. Appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Can I show up with my Alfred Hitchcock voice imitation next time?
Maybe so, eh? Whatever works for you, man. That'll be hilarious.
All right. If you hear Alfred Hitchcock next time, then...
looking forward to it.
Then it's me. Okay.
So keep checking those dirty bombs that are falling out. Thank you, Gar. Have a nice night. That was Gar calling in. I think he was in the conversation on Sunday's last night's show. Keep it rolling there, rolling. Okay. So then let me give you back to your foundation. So you had Brock wrote the paper on global warming in the middle of nuclear testing era. And so he wanted to blame everything on you instead of nuclear testing, see? Miles Allen wrote a paper. Now he's got a cushy job at Oxford in the United Kingdom. He's the physicist behind net zero. So you had Brock and you had Miles Allen. Then how do you get your carbon footprint where you're the villain? Oh, that was BP Oil. BP Oil The idea of a personal carbon footprint was popularized by a large advertising campaign of the fossil fuel company BP in 2005 after an oil spill. So they wanted to blame you for making them start up a company to supply you with product. And they did. And now the United Nations seized up on all of them. And this creep, James Hansen, disgusting James Hansen, best known for his research in climatology. Thank you, NASA, you sack of Dewey. His testimony on climate change helped raise broad awareness of global warming, aka climate change. So he was the grandfather of climate change, James Hansen. BP Oil was carbon footprint. Miles Allen was net zero. And Brock the trader, Wallace Brocker. And so James Hansen's testimony was a turning point in 1986, was it? I think. Yeah, 1988. He stood in front of Congress like thousands of people do every year. But those four people, so you have global warming with Wallace Brocker, you have Miles Allen with net zero, you have BP Oil with carbon, footprint in carbon, and you have James Hansen with climate change. Hansen's testimony was pivotal. It marked official beginning in 1988 of global warming policy. He's the guru that all of these were used by United Nations, which is 195 militaries, to blame you for the 195 militaries and the industry. Blame you. And these people profited handsomely off these papers. Well, you're getting a good pension out of this for that paper. We're going to use it to direct humanity and everybody else and take the blame away from the people that actually done it, like the nuclear industry. So here we go. COP27 sponsor, Coca-Cola, is the top plastic polluter for 5 years in a row. So if they were serious, they would never take the money. And we're talking huge monies. The pavilions are $500,000 each down there. Coca-Cola is the biggest polluter, followed by Pepsi and Nestle, like chocolate and everything else you do, right? So the Children and Youth Pavilion, which is a brand new one for constipated parties, a bunch of different organizations pulled together $500,000 so they can have a children, and all the politicians have went there and got their picture taken and left immediately again. $500,000 down to the biggest pedophile convention in human history, the United Nations Constipated Party 27. It's full of degenerate monsters. IAEA chief Raphael Grossi runs around shaking hands, hugging the little children, get his picture taken. Is part of a climate crisis solution. This is the first time the Atoms for Climate. See the Atoms for Climate? Kind of reminds me of the Atoms for Humanity, where all the military industrial machines only shoot depleted uranium munitions, DOLRAM, depleted uranium low-level radioactive material. They removed the latter part of that acronym for some reason. Nobody's really sure, of course. But hey, they got Atoms for Climate and Atoms for Humanity. The A-10 Warthog shoots 1.5 tons a minute of dirty bombs. And when you do the combination, the extrapolation is around 44,000 Hiroshima-sized bombs worth of low-level radioactive fallout. Low level is enough to destroy your chromosomes and DNA and bacteria and fungus and insects and everything else. Atoms for Humanity. You need an Atoms for Humanity pavilion booth down there for the depleted uranium. It's time to give the depleted uranium some love at these these are dirty bombs. That's what nuclear does. It produces dirty bombs from the fuel pools all day long and poisons your entire biosphere. After 80 years, if you don't fight back, then what's wrong with you, really? Nuclear science technology are part of the solution about mitigating greenhouse gas emissions. They got a lot of balls claiming that nuclear had any redeeming qualities. They're Mithra. We're back to here, are we? It always seems this way. Put on me stomping boots. Arr. Let me start off with the French model of Fukushima radioactive fallout to kind of give you an idea how this actually works. This is a 16-day model of radioactive fallout. It was much worse than this. But after 16 days, it covers almost the entire planet. It pulses energy almost at the speed of light every second for millions of years. It never goes away. So what's worse, carbon or 80 years of these disease factors hemorrhaging into the environment? I wonder why. Or potato chips. Maybe it's potato chips, Danny. Grossi, anti-human, anti-species, opened for the first time a nuclear pavilion. And they probably gave him the check back for $500,000 by the IAEA, which is United Nations, in cooperation with the nuclear community. Yeah, they're a community, all right. They're a death cult community. Took part in the Constipated Party 27 event and met with climate leaders. Climate leaders. Honey, are you a climate leader? And decision makers, shakers and movers, to discuss the ways in which the nuke touts could play a role in helping solve the global climate problem. Again, this is probably the most dangerous language since Hitler took the stand. It's reminiscent, for sure, isn't it? The United Nations, also disguised as the IAEA, and its partners like UNSCLEAR and IRPA and the IPCC, which are all, by the way, United Nations. And its partners, which is United Nations, are hosting more than 40 events at the pavilion, all of which have been live streamed. I done myself a favor and wouldn't watch it because you know what happens when I start watching this stuff, don't you? Not good for Dana. We all know that the challenges posed by climate change are very, very difficult, Grossi said. That's why nuclear is here. We're here to finish off whatever species survived the last 80 years of our radioactive fallout. We all know that the challenges posed by climate changes are very, very difficult. They're direct cause of radiation emissions from hundreds of nuclear plants worldwide hemorrhaging into the environment, thousands of fuel pools hemorrhaging into the environment. When you look at the weapons production originally, that was despicable, where they just poured it into the rivers, the lakes, the streams, the estuaries, the oceans. Unmitigated evil. And their children's grandchildren, our current generation in charge of the nuclear industry. The inbreeding is easy to trace. Over the past 5 decades, nuclear energy has avoided the release of more than 70 gigatons of carbon dioxide over the past 5 decades. Look, first off, carbon is really good. You can't have insects or birds or animals or trees or plants or a planet. If you get rid of carbon, the planet will be nothing but a naked bare rock just like the moon. More carbon, the more species you got. And the problem is nuclear. Carbon is a cycle. And today, globally, more than 400 reactors produce about a quarter of the world's low-carbon energy. This is a batshit lunatic assertion. I don't think I've heard that one before, which is obviously then it has to be new because we've been around for since the caveman, basically. More than 400 reactors. There's about 414 that's actually active, even though they're trying to convince you there's 440. There's no low carbon, period, coming in. Nuclear is the most, and we shouldn't use the word carbon ever. That's Miles Allen's problem, done that to us. We should be using pollution. And nuclear is the biggest polluter of all times. A quarter of the world's low carbon. I mean, just to mine it, it's absurd. To reprocess it into yellow cake is absurd amount of chemicals. All of that is evaporated into the environment on top of that. The chemicals. Yeah. Then to turn it into fuel cycle is hideous, absurd. Now it's splitting the atoms. And then when you take it out of the reactor after a lousy 18 months, now it's still splitting the same atoms for 1 million homes, except every day that's released into the environment, there's no containment. And then they're surrounded by farms as far as you can see to poison you in your supermarket. It's a really, truly degenerate, hateful plague is what this industry is. It's the true atomic plague. Not just the people, and they are a problem. They're the most arrogant humans you'll ever encounter is the people from the nuclear industry. The most pompous and hubris I've ever seen. They're like 3-year-olds throwing tantrums all the time. Produce about a quarter of the world's low carbon energy. They can't produce a paper to back up that assertion because it's ludicrous. They're the most energy-intensive thing in human history, period. They need 2 external gas, oil, and coal plants just to run a nuclear plant dedicated to it. Just get rid of the nuclear and run it the same amount of energy with the other 2 plants. All it does is destroy. The emissions are permanent forever, pulsing energy every second. That's global warming. That's unassailable. A new IAEA Atoms for Net Zero. Atoms for Humanity, the A-10 Warthog, the dirty weapons. The arrogance, though. The incredible arrogance. Atom for this, atom for that, atom for these, atom for those. Who the freak are these creatures? Has anybody checked to make sure they actually got a pulse? Because there's no evidence that they got any human attributes, is it? It's not like the world hasn't told them, get lost, scumbags, 1 billion times. No, they put on their $5,000 suits and now they're invincible. Now they're just like gods in their own little minds. Yeah? International Energy Agency, which is United Nations, by the way. Executive Secretary Fate Bryce-Roll, which was pro-nuclear, worked in the nuclear industry for decades. The nuclear power is making a comeback, and now he's in charge of the International Energy Agency. Not to be confused with the International Atomic Energy Agency, that are the best buddies, the best friends, the best BFFs, those guys. And they're all little lapdogs of the nuke-tart United Nations, the destructive military-industrial complex, a.k.a. the New World Order. In the past, expressed that in addressing the climate crisis, you got 27 years addressing the climate crisis. And if you can't solve something in 27 years, it's time to get the frig out of the way, silly. Nuclear power can play a role in countries where it's accepted to address energy security. Energy security is a new word since February, when United Nations put in embargoes against Russia. Without a referendum in the 195 countries, they now turned into a nightmarish inflation. Along with their little pet idiot, NATO, which is not even supposed to exist, right? They were created in response to the Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union dissolved and got rid of everybody's pensions like a coward, instead of letting someone else fix it, shit for brain NATO, idiot machine NATO, genocide machine NATO was supposed to be dissolved too. In June, the idiot machine for United Nations, the IAEA, released a report identifying the potential policies, regulatory, and market changes could create new investment opportunities, which is absurd for nuclear. When you go back 2 years, they have none of that rhetoric whatsoever. They were against nuclear. They put Fate Briceroll in position of authority. Now everybody's pro-nuclear. At Constipated Party 27, Grossi engaged with the young children, young nuclear activists, pro-nuclear activists, which started a few years ago with Michael Schellenberg, right, with Environmental Progress, and his attack dogs, who've all had their go at me, saying he was inspired by their efforts to change skeptic minds with science and facts. You know, the young nuclear activists. It's absurd. So they got the children's kids pavilion, and now they turned them into little monsters. Oh, you got to be pro-nuclear. That's $500,000. On Thursday, the cops, which is disgusting, they call themselves that. It's despicable. It's pathetic that they couldn't come up with a real name. Youth and Future Generation Day. Youth and Future Generation Day. That's brainwashing in a whole sick way, folks. Grossi joined a panel of young professionals in the nuclear field. What the hell are they doing there? It's really disgusting. It's horrific, pathetic, in a pathetic way. The IAEA works with the young generation. Yeah, like children can barely read. As part of the United Nations Climate Change's official program, United Nations. Like, listen, you're not our gods, you're not our kings, you're not our leaders, you're not our elected leaders. You have no authority over any country whatsoever. You're doing it through sedition with politicians in each country. That's how you're getting away with all kinds of... You should be held accountable permanently, and the people previous that held these positions should be charged with sedition against the countries that they represented. It's part of the United Nations Climate Change official program, which is the military-industrial complex. Why are you supporting the military-industrial complex, for God's sakes? To the people out there that think United Nations is somehow has some redeeming qualities. Grossi took part in the event Interplay of Low-Carbon Technology for Resilient Net Zero. Low carbon for net zero. Miles Allen would be proud. He probably dreamt it up. That's Grossi there in the middle, by the way. They couldn't find him today. Police are looking for him. This man will sniff your bike seat. That Grossi. In the middle. Progress with Fukushima Reconstruction highlighted today at the Constipated Party 27. This is absurdness. Japan's pavilion, which costs $500,000, is down there now and shows up everywhere, this same group, to brainwash the people, to capture, because the people going there are the captured part of the population. They suck. They're sucked right into the United Nations. They actually think that they have some human qualities. Or they're just to be useful idiots and know the difference. But they're not there because they're smart. If you're at the United Nations, you're not there because you're smart. You're there because you got to suck the dick of the nuclear industry and the military-industrial complex and the New World Order. All of these, of course, are United Nations. The stupidest thing humanity ever created. It's the stupidest thing humanity accidentally created. It's revolting. Its entire legacy, all the way back to the 50s, when it went in and burnt every village in North Korea, attacking the women and the children, burning them to death with napalm. Millions dead, millions missing, millions in refugee camps, millions unaccounted for, millions of orphans, because they were fighting with South Korea. And 70 years later, they still got land, sea, and air embargoes against them because they wouldn't get on one knee and kiss the ring. because they're not cowards. They're infinitely better. Everybody in North Korea is infinitely better than anybody in the United Nations. They never bowed down a single time in North Korea. And all they done is nothing for the last 70 years, where the United Nations has attacked endless countries, killed hundreds of millions of people in that same time span. North Korea never attacked anybody. All the media uses it to scare the shit out of everybody, and everybody sucks it in like an idiot machine. Unskilled and destitute are the hiring targets for Fukushima, not nuclear scientists. The mentally handicapped, not nuclear corporations. Unclear and IRPA and the IPCC and IAEA and the International Atomic Energy Agencies have never went to Fukushima and talked to these people or walked the same quarter mile a single time. All they done was, the couple of times that they claimed they were there, was 100% faked. It was absurd. We cover it all the time, year after year. Fukushima reactor leak was plugged with liquid glass. What's that, you might ask? Well, liquid glass is a mixture of sawdust and newspaper. So that's pretty impressive, isn't it? This was right away in April, not less than a month after the meltdown started. The crazy, kooky, pro-nuclear community was putting out stuff like this. I'll show you what it looked like when that headline came out. Here's what it actually looked like. Said he fixed it with glue and sawdust. It's hard to imagine somebody actually said that, see? It's hard to imagine there's somebody that evil would say something like that. But that's the norm when it comes to the nuclear industry. They treat people like they're 6 years old or so, 8 years old maybe. And they have zero compassion for humans or anybody else. They have contempt for all species and humans in particular. Otherwise, you can't write a story like that. You got to have absurd amount of contempt, which is what United Nations is perfect at, right? Japan aims to dispel harmful rumors. Now, this is today's headline. Japan aims to dispel the harmful rumors. What harmful rumors? You picked up over 30 million tons of radioactive waste. That was 2015, by the way. The real number is around 60 million one-ton bags. 30 million tons, if you put a ton in the back of a one-ton pickup truck, bumper to bumper, that's 5 rows of traffic bumper to bumper around the planet. And so this was just the Fukushima prefecture, which is only 3% of the land that they actually, made some kind of effort at picking up contaminated topsoil and leaves and stuff. Now they're dumping it into a field a couple of kilometers from the ongoing nuclear meltdown in an exclusion zone and growing food in it. Try making that up on your own. Oh, and 2 days before Forrest Gump got fired, he lifted all restrictions on 14 prefectures that 55 countries had banned for over a decade. He removed all restrictions. He said, I can't wait to fill up the supermarkets and the corner stores with food from Fukushima nuclear waste land. Should 100% be tried for sedition and genocide and omnicide. Japan aims to dispel harmful rumors that products from the nuclear wasteland, which is 14 prefectures, not just Fukushima, were banned by 55 countries for a decade. How is that a rumor? I don't know, Dana. How is that a rumor? I don't know either. What do you think I am, a genius? So the constipated parties, 27, to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, UN Framework Convention. It's the same thing if McDonald's come out and said, this is our McDonald's Framework Convention on Climate Change. We're going to call it Constipated Parties 27. It has the same amount of authority. It has zero authority in anybody's country. But they just get people in key positions and then they make it happen without the consent of the country or the population. And that's sedition. That's what they're doing there, is to conspire. And you know, it's easy. There's 35,000 useful idiots ran down there, groveling and licking boots, every one of them. Fukushima's superhero tells kids the arch enemy is bad reputation from nuclear crisis. Gee, where'd I hear that before, I wonder? Fight against fools and sloppy people. Japan also hopes to show the world efforts to develop environmentally friendly communities in Fukushima's nuclear wasteland. Fukushima radiation will poison food for decades, studies find. Environmentally friendly communities. There's no such thing as environmentally friendly community in a nuclear wasteland. And you murdered so many people. You got 800. Let me find it for you. It takes a second. You got 865,000 extra cancers the year later in 2012 across Japan. Cancer is just one of 1,800 illnesses. Heart problems, liver, lung, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, schizophrenia. The list goes on and on and on. It's not just cancer. The fact that they got 865,000 extra cancers, right, a spike, if you will, in less than a year, after an event we've never seen before, with multiple reactors detonating and fuel pools detonating. 8 fuel pools and 4 reactors melted down. It's insane that they claim that reactor 4 didn't melt down and there's just a stump. I'll show it to you, because you won't believe me. I can't even do a radio show because you won't believe me, because it sounds too fantastical, right? Fuel pools were at the top of the buildings. They're depicted in the red to your right. To your left is the stump of reactor 4. It's just a stump. No, that didn't melt down, Dana. What are you talking about? Of course it melted down. Look at it, moron. No, that didn't melt down, Dana. Of course it did, dummy. Look at it. Nope, didn't melt down. UN says it didn't melt down. Therefore, it didn't melt down, Dana. So, if you don't want to have a talk about facts, you came to the wrong place. That's all I got is facts, unfortunately. It's an absurd burden on top of that. Being honest is so easy, but it hurts the brain because you can't find likewise people that are actually out there having that conversation. If you're honest, you don't know how to write. Apparently. This year's exhibition shows the evacuation orders have been lifted in some areas near the Tokyo Electric Power Company. They're talking about Fukushima and Okuma, which are 2 kilometers south and north of ongoing multiple nuclear meltdowns that are evacuated communities for over 11 years because it's stupidly radioactive. It's idiotically radioactive. It's moronically radioactive. It's hideously radioactive. It's monstrously radioactive. Which had it had 4 nuclear meltdowns. 4 nuclear meltdowns. Nuclear reactor power plant meltdowns. Meat is on the menu, but not the agenda. Which is interesting because they're telling people you can't eat meat, but they got huge meat menus for the constipated Party 27 participants, useful idiots. A lot of these people are just good people. They're just sucked in. Director at the Changing Markets Foundation. A campaign director to Replanet, NGO Replanet. We got to repopulate it with useful idiots only. Get rid of people like Dana. Scarce water supplies, a remote part of the constipated Party 27 host, are being poisoned by uranium runoff. Egypt got a uranium mine about 30 kilometers away, and it's got the water supply polluted. Or is it from Fukushima radioactive fallout and they're trying to blame it on that? Speaking of anti-human, Michael Schellenberg, you typically wrote a lot for Forbes, along with what just stopped oil. That's the group Stop Oil. Just Stop Oil. Get Wrong and COP corruption. Schellenberg is a disgusting public relation firm for nuclear. He's a pro-nuclear public relation lobbying group. He speaks with environmentalists, which is the farthest thing from being an environmentalist and a conservationist, and a pro-nuclear activist. Remember me talking about Schellenberg earlier, environmental progress? Yeah, that's Schellenberg right there. He's a hideous creature. He's a mass murdering, hideous creature, that creep. They take a deep dive into Schellenberg's book, Apocalypse Never, which I can defeat that and coming up in a little bit. And consider why nuclear will save us all. It's too slow, it's too late, it's too expensive, it has too many emissions and from the fuel pool for a planet to survive, for God's sakes. All the fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation directly into the environment with no containment. Which, when you think about the national laboratories, Idaho National Laboratories, Hanford, Santa Susana, and the rest of them, these reactors had no containment. So they were just full steam, nuclear chain reaction, hemorrhaging radiation directly into the environment. Like, the evilness of it is a whole different level. The evilness of it is a whole different level. If you had 10 nuclear scientists and you took 10 away, put them in a rocket and sent them to the sun, when you turn around, there'd be another 10 nuclear scientists sitting there. They never say nothing about the 10 nuclear scientists that went to the moon or the sun. Nuclear power is a non-issue for the rest of the world at Constipated Party 27. Of the most striking things for an Australian, at Sham La Sheikh, is how uncontroversial atomic power is as part of a clean energy base load mix. It's not clean, it's not energy, it's disease factories, and the byproduct is energy. Base load mix. How uncontroversial. She thought it was really stunning how uncontroversial the nuclear industry was at the Constipated Party 27, supported by the biggest supporter of the nuclear industry I've ever had, which is United Nations, right? Which is an orchestra. The Atomic Energy Agency's job is to promote nuclear power. ERPA's job is to promote nuclear power. UNSCLEAR's job is to promote nuclear power. The IPCC's job is to promote nuclear power. UNSCLEAR or UNICEF's job is to promote nuclear power. They got over 1,000 of these organizations, and they're all the same. They're United Nations. And they're all used as controlled opposition for each other. There is no cops for dummies. Cop for dummy. How despicable to use that name again. That drives me insane. How pathetic. They couldn't come up with their own name. They got to steal an authoritative name. What a cowardly thing to do, isn't it? Nor Phoenix for climate change, just bombardment to TikTok. I don't see TikTok, I don't watch it. Sound bites. Well, we don't do sound bites here, do we? And virtual signaling without any real engagement or explanation. No, because it's all posturing. It's 27 years and nothing, bird brain. And a condition procedure, precedents for the effective, affordable, decarbonized economies, which is thanks to Miles Allen, right, with his paper. The other striking thing about constipated parties is that Global acceptance of nuclear as part of the clean energy baseload mix is a non-issue. No, because there's 35,000 useful idiots there. They're just gonna regurgitate whatever they're told. That's their job, to be useless idiots and think that they're not. These are not stupid. The UN, they're brilliant. They're brilliant of how to destroy humanity and all the species. That's all they know how to do is destroy. They can't nurture something. At the weekend, U.S. Special Envoy for Climate John Kerry, which is like saying you're going to talk to a rock for a few minutes because he's got an agenda, which is whatever the United Nations agenda is. Open a vibrant panel debate on this theme, animated by the CEOs of two small modular reactor companies in the U.S., Scale and Natrium. Neither one of them exists. Both of them are dependent upon Russia's fuel on top of that. So neither one of them exists. There is no facility. They barely got small modular reactors design on a paper. Is missing thousands of pages. It's a total... It's designed to stop you from having a future. No. Small modular reactors. Well, why not use geothermal? It's available, it's cheap, it's easy, it's stupid, you can plug and play. You can replace any gas, oil, coal, nuclear plant on the planet by just drilling down and tapping into the heat. It's the same. In fact, it's a more consistent heat. There's no emissions from the fuel pool 24 hours a day in all the farms. Why would you build nuclear power plants in farmlands? What kind of sickness is that? Where almost every nuclear plant is in the middle of prime active farmland. What kind of demented, sadistic, twisted engineering is that? Because it's meant to poison everybody, also at the supermarkets. Guaranteed to get them, see? Well, we'll build it in farmlands as far as you can see. Use that, and then everything is poison. We'll get to humans yet. From the Australian perspective, the response seemed almost otherworldly. With Australia, concept of nuclear power stuck somewhere between 1986 and 2011. That's an incredible insult right there. That line. That's an actual contempt for all humans. And if you meet up with these people and say, I hate humans, they're like, wow, me too. That's what they're actually like in real life. I kid you not. They'll say it, if you have a conversation with them, they'll say it over and over, I hate humans. And there's this I see it all the time, right? This incredible contempt, this incredible hate for humans and species. Not their own. They don't even talk to them anyway. Australia is still among the worst climate performers despite the new targets. So Australia should shut its pie hole. Which is polite for Australia. They're extremely vicious. The report compiled by the Climate Action Network. Can you imagine the arrogance? Oh, and the New Climate Institute. You know what their job is? To screw everything over, right? Can you imagine? But what kind of creature starts up an organization like that and then is able to get the media to quote them? Only one, right? The controlled opposition itself. Climate Action Network senior officer. Make it even worse. Senior officer at a corporation. Climate Action Network senior officer. Can you imagine how sadistic these people actually are? China is now the world's biggest polluter after nuclear, of course. Under Secretary Jenkins' remarks on the Constipated Party 27 climate hug, we don't have time. We don't have time, he said. Nuclear energy is a critical climate solution. Well, if you don't have time, how is nuclear going to be the solution? Don't say small modular reactors. Too late. So something that doesn't exist is going to be the solution. Something that takes a decade or two to bring to fruition is going to be the urgent solution. That's what you're going to bring into the solution. In other words, no solution. But that's consistent with what we hear from these people. Well, we need to act now. We need more nuclear. Yeah, it's going to take 20 or 30 years to get there, but we need it now. It's double talk on a whole different level. We don't have time. So why would you look at nuclear? Weirdo. Why would you though? What's going through that little hamster in your head? I wonder. You got to give it a flick and get the hamster to start running on that treadmill. An earthquake is 6.1 magnitude. Earthquake. Now, the story you're going to hear is 350 kilometers deep. But there was 2 earthquakes on that day. 2. Not 1, 2. The other one was 12 or 10 kilometers deep. And 90% of the headlines were on the one that was 350 kilometers deep. But the one that was 10 kilometers deep, that was really, there was 6 headlines or something. Earthquake with a preliminary magnitude of 6.1 struck off the coast of central Japan. The tremors were felt strongest in the eastern prefectures of Fukushima. Although tremors were felt strongest in the eastern prefectures of Fukushima, Ibaraki, agency said the eastern part of the country was affected by a phenomenon called abnormal seismic intensity, in which the jolts are believed to have traveled from faraway epicenters, what they call subducts, without weakening in strength. Right? But they got everybody to focus on the one that was 350 kilometers deep instead of this one, which is 10 kilometers deep. Oh, hang on. Was felt also in Tokyo without weakening its strength. Several hundred kilometers north at a depth of 10 kilometers. I'm missing the headline. I jumped, sorry, hang on. At a depth of 10 kilometers triggered emergency alert. So they had everybody talking, because there was all kinds of media reported on one 350 kilometers deep. But yet off Fukushima, they had one that was 10 kilometers deep at the same level, 6.1. What's the coincidence? What's the odds of that actually happening, I wonder? So the geoengineering on the marine geoengineering. So they're trying to blame a lot of the die-offs on marine geoengineering instead of what really happened was Fukushima. But they're right? You should stop all marine the geoengineering is a response to Fukushima. There was an example up in British Columbia, Canada, where this little native band got something like $6 million settlement from the government. And one of the local government officials talked them into spending $4 million of the $6 million they got up in Masset by filling a cargo ship up with iron powder and going out and dumping it along the coastline. And that would cause phytoplankton blooms, and then the salmon, they would have a good harvest of salmon that year. Of course they didn't, right? But they basically stole $4 million. I went up there and I tried to do an interview with him. And he was following me around. He wouldn't do an interview with me. I called him up. And then I seen this guy following me, so I took pictures of him. And he was trying to hide his face. And I looked up the guy. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. It was the same guy. I was on the way to the grocery shop. And I seen a guy across the street following me. Artificial upwelling marine cloud, because I was still on crutches. And so I was pretty slow. Artificial upwelling, marine cloud brightening, where they're chemtrailing the sky, right? Marine geoengineering presents huge risk, some of which may be unprecedented depending on the type of technique. This was all in response to Fukushima nuclear meltdowns event. The radioactive fallout that was catastrophic. Altering the pH of the ocean, disrupting the food chain. So this is the cover story most likely for Fukushima. There's an estimated 400 dead zones in the world from nuclear dumping, folks. When you look at the nuclear dumps, it matches up. The British spent 3 decades loading up ships with barrels and just driving along, throwing the barrels over. If they didn't sink, they would shoot them. When you drop a barrel in the ocean, every 33 feet, there's an extra 14.5 pounds per square inch. So by the time it gets down to a couple of 100 feet, the barrel's going to implode. And you're releasing it into the environment. All the way to the bottom, the rest of the way to the bottom. And they were dumping this stuff at 2,000 meters. These are absurd amount of pressure, and a 45-gallon drum can't contain it. The lid will just pop right off at these kinds of pressures. Fishnet Alliance condemns the attempt by UN's FCCC, because UN is, again, involved in all of this. Sorry, that's after. Bring that down to where it belongs. Okay, so I've done research expeditions. Here's half a dozen pictures. And from all the way from Alaska to British Columbia, Vancouver, Canada, year after year for 6 years. And here's what I discovered was the species to your left are permanently exterminated. That's permanent. You'll never take those pictures again. That's 2011. That's what it would look like to your left. 2015 or so, it was less than 100 species. By 2017, you were lucky to find a snail or a single mussel. Total extinction event. That's what Fukushima has done. And now the ocean in the Pacific or the Atlantic is dying. Mass bird die-offs from starvation. They're trying to blame that on the bird flu, but originally in April, when it started on the East Coast here, we documented it, and everybody, the consensus was they had starved to death. And that was the reports in the media. And a couple months later, they had same birds, they're still dying, starvation, and they switched to avian bird flus. And all the samples went to the same laboratories from different provinces. At Constipated Party 27, over 900 children formulated drafts seeking ecological rights. And this is what's known as the massive brainwashing machine. Students from India and other nations engaged in conversations with events organizers after Constipated Party 27 delegates over the course of 3 days. No cop-out event. Approximately 3,500 students working on a draft framework for an organization that doesn't have any of these attributes. So you got, hang on, I'll bring up the poll here. Should scumbag IAEA really have a pavilion at Constipated Party 27? Nuclear is the world's biggest polluter. How did our video do last night? 144.56. And so our video was 4 seconds longer last night. 12 hours later. Flowing sewage, bewildering signs, lack of water. Constipated Party 27 faces logistic nightmare. Logistic nightmare. Let me see if I can find that video. Just bear with me. Where is he to? There he is. This is Patrick Clausen from the Washington Institute. And Patrick is going to explain to you the history of wars, how the wars were created and then blamed on other countries.
I frankly think that crisis initiation is really tough. And it's very hard for me to see how the United States president can get us to war with Iran. Some people might think Mr. Wilson wanted to get us into World War I. You may recall he had to wait for the Lusitania episode. Some people might think that Mr. Johnson wanted to send troops to Vietnam. You may recall he had to wait for the Gulf of Tonkin episode. We didn't go to war with Spain until the until the Maine exploded. And may I point out that Mr. Lincoln did not feel he could call out the Federal Army until Fort Sumter was attacked, which is why he ordered the commander at Fort Sumter to do exactly that thing which the South Carolinians had said would cause an attack. Some people might think that Mr. Roosevelt wanted to get us into World War II, as David mentioned. You may recall we had to wait for Pearl Harbor. So if, in fact, the Iranians aren't going to compromise, it would be best if somebody else started the war. I frankly think that crisis initiation is really tough. And it's very hard for me to see how the United States...
So they staged the wars and then blamed it on another country. So it's very difficult to see how this president can get us to war with Iran. And that's what United Nations does. That's United Nations routine, by the way. There's 3,500 delegates from nearly 200 countries. Climate policy experts at German investment. A sewage pipe on Wednesday evening appeared to burst near the exit of the blue zone. That's where you're not allowed to go. Executive officer at the British Society of Soil Science. An officer at the British Society. Again, right, they give themselves these grandiose labels and they give them a $5,000 suit. They'll murder everybody to fulfill whatever their boss told them. It's horrifying that the majority of this type of society is made up of those types of people. Biden touts U.S. spending at Constipated Party 27 for UN climate conference. Attendance at the UN climate conference known as Constipated Party 27 in the resort town of Sharm el-Sheikh is the first stop on a round-the-world trip. Biden's going around the world. The U.S. commitment of some $375 billion over a decade to fight climate change gives Biden greater leverage. Well, United Nations is their best friend. It's the military-industrial complex, right? He comes to Constipated Party 27, makes new promises, but his old promises have never been fulfilled. He's like a salesman selling goods with an endless small print. Only worse than that, right? Like Vegas, but worse. It fails to charm Constipated Party's delegates. There have been traffic jams, water shortages, and an atmosphere of state repression. But every one of these is, like last year they had 10,000 cops were snatching children off the street in front of their buddies in unmarked vans with unmarked police and military. A fleet of electric buses, which is exactly what they done last year in Glasgow. Loss and damage is put on the agenda for the first time. The world is on a highway to climate hell with our foot still on the accelerator. Humanity has a choice: cooperate or perish. Cooperate or perish. Think about that. The Highway to Hell, and stick climate in there, which is a popular AC/DC song, Highway to Hell. So you have to steal that. With our foot still on the accelerator, which is from a song from the 70s. And humanity has a choice: cooperate or perish. Which I'm sure is from another Hollywood movie about aliens taking over Earth or something. Humanity has a choice: cooperate or perish. Give us $125 trillion or perish. The outcome of the climate summit is crucial to ensuring strong targets at COP15 in December, warns biodiversity head. Well, first off, we studied the insects and the birds and the small species. A Paris moment for biodiversity at COP15 in Montreal in December. I can't remember what the hell that's referring to. Constipated Party 27 Youth and Future Generations Day ensure younger voices have seats at the table. Constipated Party makes history with the first ever youth-led climate forum, Children and Youth Pavilion and Youth Envoy. Brought together by high-level policymakers with young representatives from the Conference of the Youth. Youth represented their key demands that paid specific attention to action for climate empowerment, adaptation, resilience, accessible finance. Again, finance, climate empowerment. At the COP27, which is for the children, over 1,000 youths from more than 140 countries before the official opening of COP27, which is just a horrific thing to do, is call it Constipated Parties. COP27 Youth and Future Generation Day. Here's what happened on day 5 of the UN Constipated Party 27 climate talks. Here's what happened. Again, the war in Ukraine is driving a new push for fossil fuel because NATO and United Nations countries were forced to put an embargo against Russia, and they had no other supplier, which meant they only hurt the people in their countries with the inflation because Russia just sold it to somebody else. 100% never let a crisis go to waste, right? And they wrecked the whole planet. Now can't even afford to do anything because of deflation, since United Nations forced 195 countries to put embargoes. So like all they can do is destroy. They're really good at it too. And now they got the whole world trying to blame Putin for saying he won't give them oil. We've been covering this for months, since February. We even made a video when the United Nations said we're going to have our vote, and all the countries agreed to have an embargo against Russia. And that was instant inflation in every one of these countries, which eventually spread out to everybody else. It's disgusting, right? Never waste a crisis. Scientists says resilience in fossil fuels needs to plummet immediately in order to avoid catastrophic global warming later this century. Scientists, well, like Jim Hanson's, Miles Allen, Brock Wallace, BP Oil, and those people, right? You got to get rid of nuclear. Nuclear's emissions are hemorrhaging into the environment, pulsing energy every second. Science say resilience on nuclear fuel needs to be plummet immediately in order to avoid catastrophic global warming. How measuring attitudes to climate change could speed up the global response. How measuring attitudes to climate change. Measuring attitudes to climate change. Like, what the fuck does that even mean? Measuring attitudes to climate change could speed up the global response. Well, these are not stupid people. The problem with them, they are stupid, and the thing that works for them is that they're stupid. They're stupid in that they're complacent. They're not willing to have a conversation. The United Nations, Dana, is huge, it's powerful. Why would they lie to you? Why wouldn't they? I showed you how the world is actually ran in a short video just a few minutes back with Patrick Clausen. Blaming something as abstract as capitalism can also leave us feeling hopeless and underplay personal responsibilities. Backed by legislation, they could underpin licensing agreements of a system of fines that would be central to urgent global agreement in the same way that emissions leveled at the moment. Perhaps then, even if capitalism did cause the mess, a different approach to capitalism could get us out. A different, right? So even if capitalism did cause it, maybe another kind of capitalism will get us out. This is defeatism. IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency, leading IPP scientists, which is the IAEA, which is United Nations, the IPCC is United Nations, IAEA is United Nations. You can't use them for evidence. It's calling for nuclear for net zero. Nuclear for net zero. Like anything, they'll publish just about anything as long as it promotes like atom for climate. This is absurdness. This is completely out of control. Now they're just out walking on everybody's faces. If you don't give us everything we want, then we'll put more embargoes against commodities in countries we need, and that way you won't be able to afford to buy a toothbrush. With rising emissions threatening to tip the world into catastrophic climate change, leading IPP scientists joins clean energy advocates at the UN Climate Change Conference. UN Climate Change Conference with their own booth for the Pavilion for the International Atomic Energy Agency and the IPCC and UNICEF and everybody else, which is all them. It's brilliant, right? How can we get more evil? Well, it's really hard. We're pretty evil right now, Dana. Evidence-based outreach around the world to drive support for net zero energy solution, including nuclear power. A lead author on the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC. Again, such a betrayal, right? Net zero advocates from the United Kingdom. Net zero, zero carbon, climate change, global warming, carbon footprint. Just keep saying it over and over and over and over. Christy Gogan, now we've covered her several dozen times over the last few years. She's a pro-nuclear lobbyist. UN Environmental Program, last 8 years is set to be the warmest on record, really, since Fukushima. Amid rising emissions, accumulated heat. Nuclear power, which provides a quarter of all low-carbon electricity. Again, in one day, we're seeing that connotation. Pelosi's statement on conclusion the first day of COP27. What is she still doing? Why she still exists out there in the capacity that she has? let me see if I got that little video clip of Pelosi. She says we got to pass the bill to see what's in it. And she'd been a senator for decades at that stage.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it. But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Try making sense of that. We got to pass the bill so you can find out what's in it. How's our poll doing tonight? Should the scumbag IAEA really have a pavilion at Constipated Party 27? With nuclear being the biggest polluter on the entire planet? No. Of course not. Farm climate innovation commitments doubled to $8 billion. So farm climate innovation commitments. So it's that carbon, goes back to that carbon footprint where every facet of your life, they're looking for a way to tax it, and this is how they can do it. Did you walk more than 8 paces in the garden? Well, you probably killed a few insects. That's going to cost you 25 cents an insect. Oh, your dog was out running around. That's a $200 fine, running over those insects. COP27 Climate Smart Food Initiative. Right, so they got their fingers into every facet of your life, this is what you're seeing, right? What do you mean you got a plant to grow in the desert? We got to charge you for that. You can't do that. You haven't got our permission to grow a plant. Greenwashing from the big agricultural industry. Payments for damage and loss. Since they got that scheme, they get lots of people going down there. Yeah, give us all kinds of money. Artists are installing their work to urge heads of state to act on climate change. At the Children's Pavilion, no doubt. Constipated parties won't help the billions facing hunger this winter. Oh, TikTok launches a new climate-aware initiative in line with Conference of Parties 27 Summit. TikTok. Includes military emissions in Constipated Party 27. Military. So, the military's emissions are not included. There was a couple of stories, but this year where he played it down, the significance of the military's emissions. And if you put in the emissions caused by Russia's and NATO's war in Ukraine, because Ukraine is being supplied by 30 countries, militaries known as NATO. Military carbon emissions and footprints are, the biggest issue is not carbon, it's nuclear fallout, pulsing energy every second almost at the speed of light. It's got nothing to do with a Constipated Party 27 activists demonstrate to stop fossil fuel funding. To stop fossil fuel funding. Like the whole planet runs on fossil fuel. There's nothing you can do about it. You can't just stop it. The best way to destroy your country right now is just stop it, but you can plan ahead and come up with solutions. But United Nations is 27 years with no solutions. Net Zero Carbon Event Roadmap officially launched at Net Zero Carbon Events Roadmap officially launched. Net Zero Carbon Events, which is Miles Allen's paper I showed you earlier. Just a single guy wrote a paper, and now it's okay to gut all humans and all species to save the insects at the top of the mountains. Measuring the carbon footprint, which is BP oil, right? Disgusting BP oil. Net zero carbon. Again, there's no small coincidence that we've been covering net zero carbon footprint year after year after year after year from the nuclear industry claiming that they're net zero, they're carbon free, they don't contribute to global warming, they don't contribute to climate change. Those four over and over and over, day after day, week after week. All the protesters getting arrested for Extinction Rebellion and Greenpeace have teamed up. Obviously, they're Extinction Rebellion had a double agent, and her name was Xeon Light. She was the unofficial official spokesperson for Extinction Rebellion, which showed up right out of the blues and got lots of useful people to go out and sacrifice it for the industry. This is an industry control operation. She was a double agent from Environmental Progress, and she bragged after she left how she thwarted their attempts to protest nuclear power plants. She was able to change their minds because she was the official spokesperson, which was not official. And she's currently, the last 2 years, she's out there with Environmental Progress, Michael Schellenberg, doing all kinds of interviews worldwide, major medias, that nuclear is the solution to everything. Cuts and broken fingernails and everything. FAO farming emissions plan to launch by next year. The UN Food Agency, they got their fingers into absolutely everything, folks. They've taken over the majority of your planet. More than 40 investors managing a combined $18 trillion. So they're looking for ways they can steal that, right? Or have that used to legitimize them. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has driven a surge in food prices globally. No, it didn't. The UN countries putting embargoes against Russia caused that. And all day, every day, we see the same narrative now. And now it's more assertive that Putin had caused it. When it's absurd, when the United Nations, without referendums in the 195 countries, was able to institute an embargo against the commodities, gas, oil, and coal, which they couldn't do without and had no other way of supplying it. These people should be charged with sedition. Constipated Parties 27 covered in clouds of failure. COP stands for the Conference for Parties, aka Constipated Parties. 27 years of constipation, never accomplished nothing. In 2014, 194 countries signed the Paris Climate Agreement, which to constrain the temperatures to under 1.5 degrees Celsius. 3 years after Fukushima, almost 4 years after Fukushima. And that's been used now to weaponize everything and take away the freedoms and liberties of people worldwide by a corporation known as United Nations. It needs massive investments. According to one estimate, the world will require $1 trillion invested annually to procure the climate agreement. Paris Climate Agreement will need $1 trillion invested each year. $1 trillion. So they want United Nations to be the richest corporation on the planet. They want $125 trillion, they'll fix everything. The way the moon is tilted, everything. Nuclear energy is the most cleanly proven source of power the world has right now. The US and France are getting 20% and 70% of their energy from nuclear power, respectively. Half of France's fleet is down from corrosion from the bombardment of neutrons. Right? We see this all the time where they're saying, well, look, France has got 70% of its electricity, despite the fact that it doesn't get 70% of its electricity or even close to it. Because over half its fleet is shut down. If we study the deaths caused per unit of electricity, nuclear technology just causes 0.007 deaths compared to coal, 24, oil, 18, blah, blah, blah. This is ludicrous. The emissions just from Japan has made the entire planet sick and every species on it. It's literally exterminating all the birds and insects worldwide as we speak in the last 11 years. The plume covered the entire planet. We've done research expeditions on the west coast after Fukushima. It's a total extinction event. To imply that nuclear is insidiously horrific assertion. Quebec launches new citizen-led program for climate action. Quebec allocated $16 million for citizens to get out there and fix the climate. That's Canada, Quebec, right? Saskatoon rally calls attention to climate change. So here they are in Saskatchewan in the freeze, and 40 people gathered and got their picture taken, made it up into the major medias to help protest climate change. So give United Nations $125 trillion and get it over with so we can all go back to being miserable. That's basically what they're saying, right? 40 people don't constitute a consensus across an entire country. Pakistan climate change minister says climate action is a battle to save our present. Pakistan has streets and streets and streets and neighborhoods of children deformed because they poured their nuclear waste into their drinking water for decades. At the $500,000 pavilion at Constipated 27. And a lot of these people think they have the moral high ground. They're so sucked in to the machine, right? You can't have a real conversation. You'll never, and what I mean by that is you're not going to hear a dissenting opinion down there. You're going to hear the exact same narrative from every single one. There will be no dissenting opinions. So they need $125 trillion to reach net zero by 2050. What was it they said earlier? Humanity can go with us or they can die. The incredible hubris to say something like that. What to watch? Climate progress hinges on crucial week 2. Many of the big names now left the climate talks in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. And that means that the real work is about to start. Hundreds of the big shots have left. And so now nothing happens. Imagine wearing a big stupid suit and it's 120 degrees out. And if you don't have a suit on, you're going to get harassed. And besides, the suit gives you the authority and the courage to exterminate as many of the human population as you can. I think a suit is disrespectful. Canada, the US, Nigeria all announced new regulations to tackle emissions of one of the most potent greenhouse gases, methane. The most potent greenhouse gas is radioactive fallout. And the minute that you put John Kerry into the conversation, you're not trying to have a real conversation. Looking for hope at Constipated Party 27. The Children and Youth Pavilion is leading the way. And we covered that at the beginning. They got some organizations paid $500,000 so they can have their booths so all the politicians can get their picture taken and pretend that on Twitter or something or Facebook that they're in hip. We all cheered and cried at the end, which resulted in a beautiful photograph together. People painted a mural at the Children and Youth Pavilion. It's absurd. The whole story is absurd. What else are young people doing at Conference of Parties 27? Young Go is only one mouthpiece for young people. Only one. A mouthpiece is a derogatory term, by the way. So why are they using that? Get them all there. All the politicians get their pictures and feel good about themselves. Right? And that's absurd. You're at a military-industrial complex pretending that you're game changers. It's bizarre. From resistance to power, exploring the role you can take in the fight against climate change. No, they're the least threatening to the industry, so they allow them to be there. Germany warns delegation of Egyptian spies. Constipated Party ignores the carbon price, which they've been trying for quite a few years. I thought they already had it. Climate cost, carbon debt, full reparation in the global south. Give us all you got. Environment cost of greenhouse gases, pollution, which is radioactive fallout. That's your... I'll give you some examples. Gas, oil, and coal emissions don't cover the planet. This is a model of Fukushima after 19 days, 466 hours. Covers the whole planet in radioactive cesiums, and they're not including all the other isotopes. And so that's never going to go away. That's not, that's not... Think of it as a snowstorm that never melts. And after 19 days, you got a snowstorm worldwide that never melts and snows constantly. Less radioactive fallout is pulsing energy every second, except it's heat, it's energy. And energy can't be destroyed. So you create it to exist, period. And you contribute. This is going on for 80 years. They've attacked every facet of the ecosystem. By all intents and purposes, we should be exterminated by now, but humans are extremely resilient. But there's 1,800 illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries that'll show up before cancer. Cancer is usually the latent one. Cancer is usually the latent one. International law demands that a country must make full reparation for the harm it has caused through international harmful acts. And so never waste a crisis and then blame it on your enemy or your best friend. The biodiversity loss is increasingly catastrophic, with species extinctions rate that is 100 to 10,000 times background. Gee, you don't suppose it had something to do with the massive radioactive fallout from Japan that is still ongoing and might never stop for millions of years? The stuff that's released from the fuel pools every day worldwide is a catastrophic event. Canada's urging countries to expand the use of carbon pricing. Canada. Without Greta, activist makes waves at the climate summit. And so they show you this picture here, and she's the assistant to the UN Secretary General on Climate Change. Right? So COP27, without Greta, activist makes waves, and then the very picture they're going to show you turns out to be the assistant to the United Nations Secretary General on Climate Change. We're not evil. We're way past that level. Claims war causing huge releases of climate warming gas, claims Ukraine. Yeah, well, when they were in Chernobyl, was vicious releases. Government Minister at Constipated Party 27 calls for more ambitious climate action. More ambitious climate actions. Those all the suits. I've never heard anything out of them, right, where they say, let's do this or let's do that. It's just all this. They measured the carbon emissions of 1,000 projects this company done, which is BP oil, right? Paper. What's your carbon footprint? Oh, goodness me. Hopes and costs are high for UK's nuclear energy future. Some experts believe the future of large nuclear plants, particularly in Europe, will hinge in part on the success of Hinkley Point C, which is way over budget long before it even started. The share of nuclear energy for electricity generation worldwide has dropped to 9.8%. And the last one, young climate activists confront UK energy minister. Sir, I have a question to ask you. Like, actually, she's 11 years old. When are you going to release the climate activists? The government is like putting them into jails, protesting against oil and nuclear. He ran away, eh? Didn't know what to do, so he just ran away. Run away like a little bird. And we killed it tonight. We got almost 100 people came through. 2 hours of brutal hard work. Always pays off. And we'll be back tomorrow night. Or day 4. This is hump day. This is Tuesday. And how did our poll go tonight? Should the scumbag IAEA really have a pavilion at Constipated Party 27? Nuclear is the world's biggest polluter. We got 40 votes, which is a record low. Now, I've been doing this show for a decade, and we're never early, never late, and it's a acquired taste, right? So to claim that only 40 people came through is quite the insult. When I posted the video originally, Let me see if I can find it. The poll was up for 2 hours and still didn't get a single vote after 2 hours. So you're not allowed to have any kind of dissenting opinion, right? If you don't be a bootlicking lapdog, then you can't have a voice. That's the reality we live in, right? And there's no opposition, so there's no one has ever come out and doing what I'm doing, where they have a 24-hour news cycle and come out and ask the hard and important questions and show the important documentation to back up any assertions, or at least provide the documentation. That's never actually been done. And the industry is so petrified of any dissent because they can't argue with you. They can't beat you in a conversation, see? And that's not their job, is to bully and intimidate and coerce the most vulnerable. Not to have a actual honest conversation. They couldn't exist. They literally couldn't exist with an honest conversation. Alrighty then. Yeah, good night everybody. It's a long day. Time I got all this put together and sat in the studio and lined all my ducks up. And I got no choice but to try. There's nobody else out there working to have a conversation. I can understand that. It's an absurd amount of work, right? It's easy, though, if you're an honest person. It's not hard at all. And so we'll see everybody tomorrow night for day 4. We start on Sunday. Our shows, 5 days a week. Never early, never late. Very consistent. Always full of new documentation. Because evil never takes a break, so we can't either. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Have a great day, a night and a great day tomorrow. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody on the next show. Thanks for coming by. And if you made it this far, don't forget to give us a thumbs up. It costs us the least and it goes the longest ways. Take care, folks.